Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is your host, David Johnson, and I am by, joined by Andrew. How you doing?
Yeah, we could, you should just cut that joined with part completely out, right?
You're thinking that I'm going to do some editing. I understand.
Oh no, I know you better than that. I'm just telling you that you should.
Look,
The idea that you actually will, no.
here's the deal. This is not Still Unbelievable. One of the biggest differences between 4S and Still Unbelievable is that Still Unbelievable takes about 4 months to put a show out that they record, and I take about 4 minutes. So
Hey, that's enough truth on here.
So, I mean, look, I could have perfectly edited shows, and you just wouldn't get as many shows. So I choose volume over quality. Thank you very much.
Look, this is going nowhere and getting worse. So I'm gonna just let that stand. That was the voice of Skeptics and Seekers, David Johnson.
So
spoken for himself.
Since we are at that point, let's try this out. This can be cut out if it's inappropriate or doesn't go well. Skeptics and Seekers, Still Unbelievable. We're not going to be different things. I mean, the same thing necessarily, but we're not going to be completely different things either. Coming in the near future, we're just going to do shows together a lot more often and maybe all the time because that's who we are, and we like to do the shows. We do a similar kind of thing. Andrew and Matt do their thing, and it's a good thing. I do my thing. It's a good thing. But when we're on the show at the same time, it's better than any of our shows when we're not, and that's just a fact. This was if I can use some woo-woo language, this was destined to be a trio. And this is kind of the dream team for me. Actually, there are one or two other people that I'd love to drag into it on a regular basis, but I think that for the last few months or year or so for me, Skeptics and Seekers just feels a little incomplete. And, I listen to Still Unbelievable every now and then, and that actually feels incomplete too. But when we do shows together, it feels complete. And so we're going to be doing more of that, more to come. We haven't really talked it through or thought it through completely, but it's coming down the road, and I think that it's going to be a good time for everyone, including the audience. Andrew, would you like to add something, or should I just cut all this out?
No, I think this is a perfect time to make the announcement. Matthew's on board and always was. And there are some other reasons to join the shows that people don't know. And this is just sort of behind the scenes of podcasting. But our two shows, Still Unbelievable, Skeptics and Seekers, we have always done our best to share guest lists, right? So it's not uncommon to see a guest on Skeptics and Seekers that will eventually show up on Still Unbelievable, or the other way around. And when we were running the properties entirely separately, we didn't have as much of an opportunity to share guests that our listeners care about. And it also meant that people would have to go into different streams, different channels to hear what sometimes was a very similar interview with not much difference. There's always some difference, right? We don't share the question list either, so there's always some difference. But the question lists and the guest interviews are bound to be better. They're bound to be more complete, more well-rounded, more interesting, more personality if we're doing them together.
Right. Totally agree. Everyone knows that For Us is not really a guest-driven show, but we do have guests every now and then, and they're great. And it would be even greater if we had more people to participate in those conversations. And it just kind of, we talk about our guests behind the scenes
All
usually,
the time. Right.
so we know when a guest is coming up on a show, and then it becomes like, oh, I'd love to have a cheap seat on that, or would you pass along my contact so that I can get him on this show? And no guest should have to be on these shows twice. Uh, Once is enough, and we can get that thing done. And so making schedules with guests and 3 people is always harder than doing it with 2 people, but it's infinitely easier than having a guest to show up on 2 different shows. And so
That's right. And there's something else that it does for us. So again, this is just sort of what's happening in the dugout, right? But the other bit of this is that it is hard for the two shows to find a good time to podcast. Matthew is he's 4 or 5 hours away, depending on the time of year, and I'm not always available on his schedule. Sometimes you're not available. Sometimes you and I aren't available at the same time. But if there are three of us, there will be more likelihood that we can find two out of the three of us to carry the flag for whatever episode is being put in the pipeline.
exactly. Andrew has a challenging schedule. It's an enviable thing, really, to someone who would envy it. I don't, but he's got a pretty good life, and there are some people out there who would envy it. But that means he's got a challenging schedule, and as busy as tend to be, my schedule remains unchallenging. Matt's schedule is well, I can tell you, Andrew has done podcasting with Matt for pretty nigh on to 4 years. He
Right.
has no idea what Matt's schedule is, and neither do I. So, it's
That's right. And this is just because we're separated by an ocean, right? And that's just sort of how it works.
right. But you would get more still unbelievable episodes as a result of the 3 of us being together, because there is more likely for any 2 of us to be able to do a show
Right.
together.
Right.
And
Well,
and and
and
then we
it
have shared
also
audiences. Can I talk about shared audiences for a second?
yes, and
'Cause
and then and then I'm going to
finish
go back to hosting because there's another interesting detail there. So
actually,
yeah, talk
finish
talk
your
about it.
finish your thought. Just remind me, because I'm not taking notes or anything, so I will have forgotten.
Oh, I will. So the other thing that we have both wanted to do, and Matthew has wanted to do, is make the hosting list slightly more interesting. Be able to pass the mic around, give the listeners some variety, and this combination, this new thing that we're doing, will accomplish that by its very organic nature without us having to do very much about it.
Yeah, so another thought on hosting. I mean, I have a series of guests that are kind of my usual suspects, and so it's not just me. I mean, technically, it's just me doing this show, and then I wrote people in to help out. But really, this show includes a lot of people that rotate in and out. When we are very, very lucky, we can get Brian Y. To
Yep.
rotate in. He's
Yep.
very good on the mic. He's extremely good. He's better than I am on the mic. Um, he's way better than Andrew. What I'm saying, hold on, let me back up. Edit. What I'm what I'm trying to say is we've got some very talented people. We've got Clint, who sometimes bounces back between the 2 shows, but we love Clint. Clint is really a host emeritus on SNS and a part of what I would consider the 4. Matt is a part of that. Darren is someone who I very much enjoy having on shows because he always has a slightly different perspective, something that I haven't thought about because our backgrounds are different. With this, with us three, me, Andrew, and Matt, um, kind of combining our talent pool, we also get to combine maybe our host pool as well. And so you might hear more conversations with, say, Matt and Brian, uh, as an example, Andrew and Clint and Darren. I don't think we've had Clint and Darren on a show at the same time, which might be fun. But we expand that kind of list of usual suspects, and I'd love to see those many combinations.
I would too. There's, by the way, uh, that's enough of you and trying to get mileage out of beating me up. You don't get to do that anymore. It's over. It's done.
Damn. So
Look,
that ended
so,
abruptly.
and oh no, the listeners around here they've heard this far too long.
No, I will be good.
Uh, well, no, that's the one thing that's guaranteed that you won't be.
Mhm.
Okay, folks, you can just take that any way you like. Okay, so there are some other folks. Brian Blaze, as for
Yes.
instance, when we want to go and really dig into some aspect of science, especially as it relates to math or uh, or the human brain, miracles, that kind of thing. Brian is the go-to guy, and he's been around both shows, and being able to have him as part of a unified show, I think does us all a real service.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
he's not the only one. So, and by the way, thank you to Brian Blaze for always making the shows more interesting when he's around. So,
Yeah. Yeah. We all do great individually, and we do fine, but we're just better. I'm better when I have someone to talk to who is not just as smart as me, but smarter than me in the areas that I want to talk about. That's a good conversation for me. Um,
me too.
you
Yeah.
know, I don't want to, as some people would say, punch down. Uh, that's not fun. And I can assure you that Andrew and I and Matt don't always agree. Uh, if I'm going to fight with someone, I want to fight with someone at that level. So
Right.
that's
And right. So punching down is not what either show has been about. From the beginning, the shows have been about finding the best people we can find to have the conversations we can have. Now, there are some notable exceptions where you don't know the guest ahead of time, right? And there's just nothing you can do about that, folks. So if you're a listener to either show, and especially if you've listened to both shows, you know that there are just some episodes where you have a guest on that seems to have an interesting proposition, and and you hit metal pretty quick, right? You start to scratch away at the proposition, and as it turns out, it was just a clever set of words to create a proposition. There's not much behind it, but you should know that that has never been intentional. It's still unbelievable or skeptics and seekers. It's just the nature of podcasting that not every guest should have a proposition dissected on mic, and sometimes it's just that they haven't gotten a chance to think about it as much as they thought they have. On the other hand, occasionally it's that you run across a good podcast host, and you're just not ready for that job. Um, so there it is. Sometimes you have a show to put out, and it has looked like we've gone around finding a guest that was just too easy to handle, but that's never been intentional.
Yeah, no, never. And so the last thing I wanted to say about this was the audiences, because
That's right.
we as podcast producers have a responsibility. There's kind of an unwritten contract between content producers and content consumers, and on the side of the content producer part of the contract is to just make it easier and better for you to enjoy the content that you want to enjoy. I mean, as hosts are going on our personal journeys, but we recognize that there are people that are coming along with us, alongside us, vicariously, and that doesn't go unnoticed, and we very much appreciate it. And we want to do the thing that makes sense to the listener. Right now, it does not make sense to have multiple podcast feeds of basically the same show.
Right.
Some of the people who listen to Still Unbelievable also listen to 4S and vice versa. But there's some where they're only people who listen to Still Unbelievable and only listen to 4S because they don't know about the different properties. So rather than having you maintain a bunch of podcast feeds and our websites and show notes and links and things like that, it makes more sense for you. I mean, if you guys enjoy listening to me and you enjoy listening to Andrew and you enjoy listening uh, to
To
Matt,
Matt.
and
And
we
everybody
have,
enjoys listening to
you
Matt.
know,
So,
and I mean, I enjoy listening to Matt. I I really I love Matt like a brother, and that is the truth. I love Andrew like a brother. He's been a brother to me for a
or,
long time,
oh, goodness.
and these are so. I love being with these people, and if you love being with these people, it makes sense for us to make it easier for you to do that, just by us doing shows together. And I don't know what the nature of that will be. That doesn't mean that I won't, go rogue and do my own damn show from time to time, because there'll be plenty of times when I want to say something that no one else has time to say or desire for it. So it's not gonna take away our individual voices, but what it's gonna take away is the need for you to shuffle between lots of things to hear the people that you want to hear.
That's right. And one more thing about audience, since we're talking about it. There's a driver for podcasters. There's a reason that we give up substantial personal time to do this. And if you've ever thought about starting a podcast and you didn't, part of it probably was that the personal time commitment to deal with the technology stack and to find something interesting to say and to put enough out to interest an audience often enough to get them to repeat listening to you. Doing that, you realized, was really a major commitment, and you may not have started a podcast because of it. But as podcasters, we very often hear from people who say, "Thank you for whatever episode. Thank you for some individual episode that really did change my life. It brought me out of religion, or it helped me think about a relationship I was in, or you know what, I was I was considering harming myself, and your show kept me from it." Those things are priceless. I mean, genuinely priceless. And we have both shows, both all the hosts have gotten letters written directly to us individually by the nature of podcasting. And my point about audience is this: by putting these two shows together, by getting these voices together that have actually changed lives, we stand a better chance of doing that for a broader audience. And that's an important part of the calculation for continuing to podcast and to put out content that people like.
Right. And even though this is kind of a recap of what we said earlier, I think I need to say it directly as well. This shit is hard. This is, so we kind of dance around that fact, but we all have lives outside of this. This does not pay us. Um, and
Nope.
we have developed, talent and resources and time around it, but it's hard. And having combined resources just takes the pressure off of each of us individually with more people carrying the same load. And so, I it will take some pressure off of me for sure. It's going to take some pressure off of Andrew because there are times when he might try to force himself to be on a show that he shouldn't be on because he's got to be doing something else, and then he wouldn't have to. I know it's going to take some pressure off of Matt because Matt, I'm fairly sure, has been cloned into 3 people already. Um, I don't understand how he does what he does, and then when theater season comes around, there's he has to break off another clone for that. So, this takes a lot of pressure off of us, and when pressure is off of the hosts, we can do better. We can do more better. And so I'm looking forward to the fall and beyond, doing more, better for you, the listeners. And I just want to, I just wanted to say that out loud because this is something that we have been saying kind of privately. And, it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen soon, and it'll happen in stages, and you'll see it as it happens, and you'll understand what's going on as it happens.
So this was surprisingly, folks, not the reason that we are on mic
Not at all the
today,
subject.
and in fact, not even subject adjacent.
No. In fact, we didn't even pre-discuss this. So,
Yeah, but it went pretty well
yeah,
for all of that.
not bad. Speaking
We've
of
done that before.
announcements, let me just say, since this is kind of a regular 4S show, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who only listen to this show once a week, maybe you have a podcast feed and you notice, a lot of shows appearing in your podcast feed. That's because I've been doing a near daily series called Shorts, Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon Shorts. And they can go anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes, however the Spirit leads. And they're in your same feed. They don't end up on YouTube. So for those in the audience who only view this as a YouTube feed, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, whatever the latest show is, I put the shorts under there. And you can also just subscribe to the podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Any thing announcement worthy going on with you and Matt before we jump into the actual show?
Just this. Matthew working hard to get us into a collective of podcasters that share the drive to share good podcasts with each other. And so in the coming weeks, you are going to hear advertising, not corporate advertising stuck in by by some podcaster, but you're going to hear us play a spot for the podcasts that we are recommending. 2 important points about this. First of all, they are hand curated. These are people we know. These are people that we trust. These are people that have content that we like. So you're not about to start hearing ads for Burger King on Still Unbelievable. That's not where this is going. But they are podcasts that we think, secondly, they are podcasts we think you would enjoy. And so you will hear a single spot up front now and then, and it will sound like a commercial for a podcast. That is because it is a commercial for a podcast, but these are all people that we know, and whose audiences we are trying to help grow because in return they are doing the same for us. So there may be podcasts that you're not listening to at the moment. And if you're not, you wouldn't get the sense that this is a shared community where we are getting something in return. You would just think, oh boy, there goes Still Unbelievable. It's down the drain like other podcasts that didn't used to have advertising, and now they do, and it's going to get worse. That's not what we're doing. And these small 1-minute spots for these other podcasts, these 60-second spots, are something that we are doing for the community, not for revenue.
Right. One day, I mean, this is beyond even, what we've talked about privately, but, maybe we have our own podcast network, large enough to be considered a network. You could call it something like Reason Radio, and you could have, maybe 16 to 20 hours worth of podcasting all the time, like an actual station. Um,
Yeah,
that would be nice. I
there
mean,
are folks doing that right now.
yeah, yeah, and then we could monetize the hell out of it. Uh, but,
Yeah, and we could
so
have a pizza party once a month. It'll be great.
I,
Look, folks, that is
as a
just
part
the
of the,
reality of podcasting. It's an inside joke. If you ever run a podcast for a year, you'll get the joke, I promise.
yeah, look, as one of the founding members of this network, I'm just wondering why I'm still having to pay for ads. I don't, I don't,
Right.
I
Look,
don't understand. So,
I'm with you. Where's my yacht party? I,
I'm not getting the long end of the stick on this one for sure. So here is the topic, folks. Let's jump in, and thanks for if you're still with us, thanks for being here this long, and for the years to come. I want to talk about the evangelistic spirit. Uh, I was going to do a solo show and just talk about an incident that happened at work, and I realized actually that's a part of a bigger topic that I want to talk about, which is kind of a Christian privilege and Christian entitlement, the attitude of Christian entitlement, especially in this country, but in other countries as well. And then I realized, well, that bumps right up against a perennial topic that I have, that I do from time to time. And it's probably been a couple of years since I've done this one. And so I have broadened it out to a discussion on the evangelistic spirit and why I detest it so much. And I have some rough ideas in my head, but I have not written any notes. I don't have a write-up. The way I think about issues is I write and then, I think as I write. That's just part of my mechanism, but I didn't do that. I don't have a list of bullet points. This is going to possibly be an unorganized stream of consciousness mess, or it could be a good show. Let's find out. Andrew, I am going to tell people what I mostly told you the other day, just to kind of kick it off. But before I do, is there any hot wash that you have about the evangelistic spirit?
oh boy, where to start? Where to start on the evangelistic spirit? First, I guess um, I have told this on Still Unbelievable, probably here on SNS. I live in a uh, extended family community of people who are highly religious. There's 4 conservative evangelical preachers just in this small group, and so I live in a community where evangelistic zeal is something that cannot be avoided, and in fact, it was such a serious consideration that for the first 2.5 or 3 years of my daughter's life, I had to fight daily to keep those people from attempting to trample on parental rights. What do I mean? I don't mean they're about to take us to Child Protective Service or anything like that. These are the people who were looking for opportunities to take my daughter while babysitting and try to indoctrinate her into religion. And in fact, they made no bones about it. They weren't hiding the fact that if they had her in private, my wishes about her religious indoctrination came second to their evangelistic zeal. That was very close to a family breaker. And it took them realizing that I was very serious. I would simply cut all ties to prevent that from happening. We will not have a child indoctrinated into religious thought before the person is old enough to think for themselves. Won't happen on my watch. Will not happen. And this evangelistic zeal came very, very close, very close to breaking all of the close family ties that my nuclear family has.
Right.
And you and I went through that. We've talked about that privately.
Yeah. That's that was a rough season. I I remember feeling, pretty bad about it because I was so distant from it. Even if I had been closer, there wouldn't have been anything I could have done about it. But I did feel uh, the pressure of that time, and I know that the pressure has somewhat eased now. But the knowledge of that tension is going to always be there, and you've always got to be on your guard for when it starts up again, because it will start up again.
That's right.
She's at the age now, where kids are going into, uh, maybe Head Start kind of a
Mm-hmm.
situation, and
Yep.
a lot of church programs are aimed specifically at kids that age, and so she's got a target on her back still.
That's right. It still governs, sadly, it still governs our every interaction. And it had this is what's so insidious about the evangelistic spirit. Not only does it govern our interactions to make sure that they're not trying to indoctrinate my daughter. And by the way, they don't all believe the same things. These four these four smaller families that are part of the larger family that I'm close to. They don't all have the same set of beliefs. You want to talk about a way to completely screw a kid up? But here's the other thing that it did. Because there are cousins here, and because we refuse to allow our daughter to be indoctrinated into religion, she doesn't get to see her cousins because they distrust that we are not indoctrinating my daughter. In other words, they want us to be indoctrinating children into the Christian myth. And because we are not sharing that evangelistic zeal, because we wouldn't do that same thing to their kids, because when their children are with us, we don't discuss church. We are not indoctrinating children in any way at all. Not indoctrinating them into some, church of science or something like that. That's just not what we do, right? Because we're not doing that.
Right. No one has ever knocked on your door and handed you a pamphlet about the good news of no God. It
Right.
it just doesn't happen.
Right. But we're also not, when their children are around, we don't discuss it. We're not teaching them to distrust what their parents are teaching them, right? We are not going behind and would not go behind what their parents are teaching them.
Right.
I think they're wrong. I think they're dead wrong. And in fact, I think they're harming their kids with magical thinking. But, but we don't conduct our relationships with those children in a way that would put their parents in doubt. And I will not have those conversations with any child until they're much, much older. We're talking about sort of teenage years when they can organically ask questions about religion from a place in their lives where they have enough experience and enough education to start asking meaningful questions about religion, right? I won't have those conversations with children. But because we don't, because we're not indoctrinating kids, they distrust us.
Right.
So there's your evangelism. It's negative on both sides.
So we're gonna get to more of this, I think, but I want to say at this point, uh, and I will speak of people whose lives I don't know well as I say this, so there will be room for someone to make corrections when I say this. But by and large, I mean the people that I know pretty well, and I'm extrapolating that to people that I don't know very well, are the atheists among us, the ones that you hear on the inner tubes. We are activists online. We are not activists in life.
Yep.
We're just not. And so even in our own homes, we are not talking about atheism. Church, religion does not donate that. The number of conversations I've had with my wife about church or God or religion are some number fewer than zero, if that is possible. She does not listen to my podcasts. She has never read a single thing that I have written, and that's not going to change because she doesn't give a tinker's damn. And when I turn the microphone off, and I get up from writing, I don't think about it either. It's just not what we
Right.
talk about or do. And I can almost guarantee, not having been a person in Andrew's house for the last few years, that Andrew doesn't talk about religion. He doesn't talk about non-religion. He doesn't talk about God. This is a thing that he gets dragged into from time to time. That's an interruption of his real life. In his real life, unless it's something brought up by his relatives or outsiders, this is not what he's talking about. We are not indoctrinating anybody. We're not bringing this up at work. We're not talking about it on the bus. We It's just not a big part of the actual life we live. And so Christians, those who are trying to be real Christians, they're very activists in life. We are the opposite from that. We are not activists in life at all. And so if you've gotten this idea that just because we do these shows and spend a lot of time doing this, and this is our polemic, that you think that this is the major driver of our life, you haven't a clue. It's not one single part of the real way that we live our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If if I can avoid a religious conversation in my day-to-day life, my life off mic, I avoid it. And the only time I have those conversations, and I think I think if people go back and listen to the Still Unbelievable episodes when I talk about this, they'll find me saying, I was drug into the conversation kicking and screaming. Right? There's some set of social pressures that were unavoidable, where they're following me around in public, insisting that I talk to them about this kind of subject, or the person wants to heal me in public. Yes, folks, there's at least 2 episodes about this. And these are not interactions that I want to have, but this damned evangelistic zeal, this idea that this person has a mission and that I'm part of their saving mission, is so consuming to them that I get followed around to talk about a thing that I genuinely have no interest in talking about on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, during the fall, the thing Andrew and I talk about more than anything else is football. So it's
Yeah, now there's your evangelistic zeal now.
because I will talk to you about some sports, but, that
Oh,
is
but see, David, that's your God. See, now we know it's not money, it's not God, it's football. That's
well, but
that's
it's only a god for like 3 months out of the year. So I mean, I don't even have a jersey. So we had, interestingly enough, the other day we had Jersey Day at work, where you just wear your favorite jersey. I had no jersey to wear,
I don't
so
have one either.
um, I'm not even a good football fan because I don't spend money on the paraphernalia. I don't bet. I just talk about it and watch the game. So, but that's not the only thing that happened at work uh, on Jersey Day. So I'm at my station doing my thing now. Most of you know by now, although you probably let it flow from your mind because it's not important. I work for the state of Mississippi, doing a job. It doesn't matter what job I'm doing. It's just a job. It's not interesting at all. I'm a state employee. I am owned by Mississippi. That may have always been true on some level. We are all owned by our states.
I am leaving the potential jokes on the table. I'm
It
leaving
just
them there.
walk away, man. Uh, so, so I'm doing my job. I'm doing my thing. I only mention the fact that I work for the state, because you might have some sense of what state rules in work environments are like. Those of you who work in other countries, you may not have states, but you still have government jobs that have, government rules and government restrictions. I bet they're not terribly different. Uh, and so one of those rules that's fairly codified now for a number of years is that you cannot do any religious proselytizing at work. Uh, and there are a number of reasons why that's there, but it's also in the handbook and so forth. It's part of the rules. But it's a rule that Christians don't feel like it applies to them. They don't think it applies to them. And so I'm doing my thing at my station, and after a series of uninteresting events, the person in front of me turns around, actually gets up and walks over to my station, thinking that they had an avenue of consolation, that I needed some kind of consolation of some kind, which I didn't. But they thought that I did, and so they wanted to, be a good neighbor, a good Southern neighbor, and give me some words of encouragement and consolation. And they started it this way. Let me tell you about a thing that happened to me recently. Blah blah blah. Jesus. And at that point, I knew it was coming, so it's not like I was a big shock. I said, "Let me stop you right there. I'm going to have to stop you right there. I do not appreciate you bringing up religion here. This is a workplace. Is not appropriate. I don't need a sermon. I don't need to hear about Jesus. I don't need to be preached at. I'm actually good. Again, not appropriate here. So let's get back to work." And he stops for a second, as if to process, as if a computer is rebooting after an error. And he says, I hear you. I understand. So let me just continue telling you about Jesus." And I said, literally that, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to stop you right there again. And I had to be even more forceful of how inappropriate this was. I need you to turn around and never try to preach at me. We're at work. It's against the rules. You've been told. He finally did get the point and stop. But this guy is not atypical. This is a typical kind of guy in a typical kind of situation where and this is not a person who didn't know or understand the rules. He knows and understands the rules, and he knew what he was doing. But I don't think he has ever received any pushback when he's talked about Jesus to somebody. I think this was maybe a first encounter for him, and he didn't know what to do with it. But part of this Christian entitlement is that he has the right to push his religion at work. Now, once again, it was one of these fake kind of, oh, this is a person in need. I'm going to pretend to be their friend and preach Jesus to them. Fuck. I don't know if I can say that when our shows get joined. They're not joined yet. Fuck you, is is what I really wanted to say. And that's, I'm going to tell you, folks, Christians, any Christians listening to this, when you do that sort of thing, that's what we're always thinking. We may not say it. That's what we're always thinking. You're not fooling anyone. We're not your friend. You're not our friend. You're not helping us. You're not concerned about us. You just see an evangelistic opportunity. And I'm here to shut that down for you. But I was just particularly annoyed that day, though, because it just struck me how much privilege Christians feel like they have and how much entitlement they have, and that the rules don't apply to them because they're religious and they're doing it for Jesus. And when you're doing something for Jesus, well, you ought to obey God rather than man. And so if I need to tell you about Jesus in a place where it's illegal, screw the law. And so
Right. And
I just wanted to vomit that out. I'll give you the floor for a minute, Andrew, while I get myself back in order.
well, I'm just picturing the scene, and because we are friends IRL, we've talked about this. And here's a question I didn't ask, but I have a feeling I know the answer. I'm guessing this wasn't anywhere close to any kind of break either, right? I mean,
No,
this is
no.
actually using what is commonly a work period, right? I
Right.
mean, look,
This
we
is
all know
him
what
getting up from his station and walking over to my station while I am trying to work.
right, and so there is actually a thing going on there that should be objectionable, separate from this sort of workplace evangelism. But because Christian zeal and the Christian need to evangelize is so common, this person gets away with both.
Right. He would never get in trouble at work for doing that. I can pretty much assure it. If I had brought it up to a supervisor, which I thought about for about 3 microns of a second, if I had brought it up to a supervisor, they would have nodded and you know, made soothing noises in the right places because they have to.
Yep.
But they would have thought less of me and not him.
Right.
I would have simply been putting myself in a compromising situation.
Right.
Because their thought would mean, what are you, some kind of atheist? You know, that's really how that would have worked out. So, yeah.
This evangelist. Now, it was interesting. There's a part of this conversation that you and I had a couple of days ago that I found particularly telling about evangelistic zeal. There are places in the United States where that wouldn't have been tolerated. A similar work environment, for instance, in the Northeast, you wouldn't have run into that. Now,
No.
it might be because there are fewer Christians. It might be because there are different kinds of Christians. It might be because workplace policies are actually being enforced. The thing in the handbook matters. But whatever the set of circumstances are that would exist, you wouldn't face it in a state that is not similar to Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in New York, for instance, you've got a pretty high concentration of Orthodox Jews. Uh, Jews do not typically bother you to tell you the good news of Yahweh. That's not that's not, that's just not how they do it.
You think it's
Muslims
because they read their Old Testament? Oh, sorry,
no,
that's probably
no, they have,
yeah.
but that's not it. Um, Muslims are more evangelistic. You know, their ideas is a little bit more similar to Christianity in the way they evangelize. So
Mhm,
I
mhm,
wanted to bring in my own history with evangelism, and maybe if there's some part of that that you want to talk about in your history, you can share that here. But um, in terms of karma, I deserve what I get because I used to be that person. So I have been there. I get it. That said, I don't think I would have ever been that person in a workplace. And that's when I was preaching. I would have never
mhm,
been the kind of person who tried to do that in a work environment. That's not how I would have done it. But I've done my share of door knocking. In fact, um, long before I did sales, and I had, as many of you know, a pretty good career in sales once upon a time. My first experience with sales was evangelism. And even though Christians don't call it sales, it's sales. And I started when I was a kid, a small kid. I would be on evangelistic teams sometimes, and we would learn the various ways to sell our religion and go door to door in groups. And we were trained particularly to do this. There was a phase when I did Jewel Miller
mhm,
videos. I know that you know Jewel Miller. I think that's the name. These Church of Christ evangelistic videos that you do in a household. I think they were slideshows, in fact.
yes.
I can't remember the machine that that you used to use for those, but
Mhm,
yeah. So I learned how to interact with strangers to sell them either own, and here's the product that I'm selling. Uh, we can do a home Bible study with you for a few weeks. And so you try to get your foot in the door and get that. That's kind of the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate sale. A step down from that sale would just get them to come to church and visit some week. And then, the preacher and whatever evangelistic committees might be
mhm,
involved can take over from there.
mhm.
Maybe the lesser sell is, well, we're here in your community and we just want you to know that we're there. And if you ever need anything, you can come to call us. So, I mean, there are
Right,
different levels of this sale, but
right,
I
because
was,
we're afraid you missed our billboard and our giant church and the steeple and the mailings
well,
and the
and the
radio spot. We're
loudspeakers that we have
right,
outside the door to,
right. We're afraid that you missed all of that, and you missed in some denominations you missed our car wash, right?
yeah, yeah,
You
you
missed
missed
our
the
bake
bake
sale.
sale. Hmm.
You missed our trunk or treat at Halloween. You missed our Christmas. You missed our Christmas pageant. We're afraid you've missed all of this, so we just wanted you to know we were here.
Right, and in the Churches of Christ, we didn't have a lot of those things. We did have bake sales from time to time, but the Christmas shows, we're a little light on the Christmas shows, I'm afraid.
Little light on, but that didn't mean that we didn't have radio programs
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
radio
My father
advertising.
used to do
And
a radio show before church every Sunday. He would go to the radio station. It was called The Bible Speaks, and he he preached that show for years.
Yeah. In fact, I remember that he did, and yeah, uh, we. I'm sorry. There's something that's sort of tickling me at the moment. It's the idea that we want you to know that we specifically, our denomination, our church, the place that wants your dollars. Okay, we want you to know that we specifically are here for you because, hey, in the great Southeast, you've probably missed the Christian message.
Yeah, yeah. Have you heard the good news of Jesus? Um, and
No, no, I missed it. Tell me.
we had to differentiate ourselves somehow from the 4 churches across the street from us. So
Look, that's right. By the way, in some places, 3 of which were Church of Christ
oh,
because
sure, of
they were.
course, yeah. Yeah. It is not, in fact, uncommon in Tennessee to have a street corner with 4 churches of the same denomination. So,
and and we're the good one of them, right? Just
yeah.
just so you know, those other people, they split off from us because
Yeah.
well,
W w
they're doing something wrong. They
we're here
love
for
their
you.
sin.
Yeah, we're here for you on behalf of this particular church congregation and not those other congregations. Yes, we wanna bring you to Christ, but we wanna bring you to Christ in our congregation. So,
Oh,
our
and
particular franchise.
right, and then there are folks. I kid you not, and this is true in every denomination I've ever been closely associated with. Far too many for me to want to talk about. There are actually books printed up of churches you can trust. And it's not the full list of churches that are carrying the same name on the sign.
Yeah. Yeah, what was that list?
The
Shepherds,
saints and where to find them.
oh, yeah, no, no, there's that. I'm thinking about the one, though, that listed Christian businesses.
No, baby.
I can't remember.
There is one. Hold on, I'm going to come up with it.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
it's it
Um,
it listed Christian, and I believe it was specifically Church of Christ
mhm,
businesses,
mhm, right. There,
owned or run by members of the Church of Christ. But once again, which sect or branch of the Church of Christ might be, um, uh, that business may have listed more people than just a handful because, advertising dollars and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was never, our evangelism, to be clear, was never a general call for you to
where did
put your
you see
faith
that?
in Jesus
Oh, my girl.
and then, attach yourself to a local church. It wasn't the Billy Graham
Right,
message. It was
right.
the very specific, put your faith in Jesus, and our church represents the way to put your faith in Jesus kind of thing.
Right. The very serious message. It sounds like I'm kidding when I say it out loud, but this really was the message. We believe we're the only ones going to heaven, and we don't believe all of us are going.
Right. No, well, we would say that directly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, if you're listening on a podcast, right, it sounds like something that people wouldn't say potentially, but this is really what we thought.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
we did,
it's a true
we
story.
did. There was, I was visiting, a large, fairly, progressive, church. I wanna say it was in, Huntsville. I can't remember, the
In
name.
fact,
It was the
that
most
Madison Road,
liberal. No, no,
maybe
no, they're not liberal. No,
they are now. So I've
okay,
heard. So
alright.
so I've heard.
They're not gonna be as liberal a it was Twickenham Station? No, not Twick that's a anyway, it doesn't matter. They were a church that had multiple services. I don't know if they would have been quite a mega church, but they were over 1,000 members. Uh, in fact, they may have had more like 1,500 to 2,000 members on the roll. I guess that would make them a mega church. Um,
certainly by Church of Christ standards.
and they had a guest. No, it wasn't a guest preacher, but it wasn't the regular preacher there. And he started off his sermon by saying, "This is a church of about 600 people, about 600 members." And he said that to a church whose membership was about 2,000. But his point, as he was making, was, "Yeah,
Mhm.
we got more people on the rolls, but really we only have about 600 members."
Look,
and
where I went to church, we'd have thought that was a remarkably generous estimate too. And I
yeah,
know some of the places that you went to church,
yep.
and they would have thought it was generous too.
Yeah, but that's I mean, we were big on the idea of only us and not all of us.
Yep,
So, one of our favorite observations was Jesus called 12, disciples, and one of those was a devil.
yep.
So,
Yep.
even Jesus couldn't get 100%, so
You know, back in the day, I was familiar with that saying too, right? But I had another thought. I don't know if I ever expressed it out loud. I probably did, but lost in the midst of time. One of my thoughts was one of them was the devil, and look at how many others were totally forgettable.
So, right,
Seriously,
right. Look at the number of them who actually did anything interesting enough with their faith so that it was written down in the Bible.
right,
Never mind
right.
extra biblical sources. The Bible, you got Jesus. He's got these 12 people, special people that's been following him all around. You would think that the book of Acts would be
Good
filled
word.
with those stories. They are not. So,
So we did say this out loud in some of the theology classes. That we tried to create evangelistic zeal by saying, look at how much service is required. Look at how we didn't use the word service in those days, as you know. Look at how much you have to do to demonstrate your faith, to get God to recognize you at the level of a Paul or a Peter or even of a James or a Jude, right? Look, imagine what is required. And of course, all of that was to instill this sort of cult devotion, right?
right.
And so we did talk about it that way. I am sure that that you did too. And if you didn't do it directly, there were plenty of people around you doing it. Look at how much you have to do with your life to be a Peter or a Paul.
Yeah, well, I must say it was only later in life when I had the realization that, most of these cats, that followed Jesus around were never mentioned again in any way that matters. You read the book of Acts, you get to Acts 19 and you get this dude called Apollo. Apollo gets a better mention than most of the apostles. Apollo wasn't one of them. Bartholomew's got to be sitting around somewhere saying, "What am I, chopped liver?" I mean, James James the Less is thinking, "What do you got to do, man?" I just reattached a man's head that didn't even get written down. So, I mean,
Well, and then you got to sort of wonder if any of the apocryphal if any of the apocryphal canon should have been actually included, right? What if those people felt like they were shortchanged, right? Look, I followed the whole score. I did everything. I followed the whole checklist, and they still didn't put me in the book. Who's going to resent that on this supposed judgment day, right?
yeah. So look, back to the subject. It's so easy to get swallowed up in the past. Um, Evangelistically speaking,
Good job.
I was indoctrinated not just to be a Christian, a certain kind of Christian, but also to be an evangelist, to be a salesman, a part of the denominational sales force that I was in. So I do understand it. I do understand the mindset of people who leave pamphlets, say, on public transportation. We had pamphlets. We did we did tracts and pamphlets all the time. Um, I understand the mindset of the person who sidles up to you when you're on a park bench feeding the ducks, and they start with you know, a test conversation. Nice, great weather we're having. I see the ducks are out today. Um, you can just if you're in the South, you can count the seconds, not even minutes, before religion comes up. Because that's what that's about. I understand the mindset because I learned how to do that, and I've done that sort of thing. So I do get it, but it's bad. It's terrible to turn your kids into salespeople for your cult. Uh,
Yes. Oh boy.
that's a bad
That's a
thing, and frankly, it's bad when you do it as an adult. But when you have your kids doing it too, at school,
yeah.
to try to fake some friendships so that you can, get kids into your youth group or whatever it is you're doing a bad thing to your children when you do that. And you should really ask yourself serious questions such as, why does God need my children to
Look,
to advertise for him?
yes. You talked about ducks in the park, and as you know, that's one of the places uh, my daughter and I go, right?
Hey,
We go to
look,
a park that
we have this in
has
common. We
ducks.
love a good park.
Right. And there are a couple of little boys. By little, I mean 6 years old. They're twins, and they are there on occasion. And the first time I met these little boys, one of them ran up to me and said, "Do you know Jesus?" He goes to a little private school here in town, and that is what they are teaching these kids. And I cannot, and I mean this, I genuinely cannot imagine a worse thing to train these children to do. I can't imagine a worse thing to train them to do within the bounds of normal. Okay, I
Right.
realize that teaching them to poke people with hat pins is in some cosmic cookie sense, okay, yes, that's worse. So hopefully the listeners aren't listening with quite that kind of ear. Okay,
Yeah.
but you know, if you want your child to develop good social relationships, this isn't even the thing to do among relatively devoted Christians.
Well, it's just it's a thing that to me shows the weakness of your God and not the strength. Because your God needs that kid over there to become a salesman. That kid doesn't even know multiplication yet. and
Right.
but your God cannot get his message to that other person unless that kid goes and sells. But once again, I did it. Dick and I, we used to go door knocking near every weekend. Uh, in fact, we do weekdays. We did a lot. Were you ever a door to door Christian salesman?
Oh yes.
Did you ever try that?
Uh,
Boy, did we encounter some interesting things in our
uh,
journeys.
so you will remember the area in Montgomery down close to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Okay. So I took. Look, the listeners, they'll have a hard time appreciating this, folks. Not a good area. Like many capitals, the area around the Capitol is sometimes economically depressed. Happens quite a lot. Don't know what the factors are for that, but it does happen.
Think about every street in a city, every city with a street called Martin Luther King Street, Martin Luther King Boulevard, something like any Martin Luther King. And this is a terrible legacy for the man. It's a bad neighborhood where Martin Luther King runs down. I don't care what city it is in America. It's a bad neighborhood. So
Right. So I took a group of elementary and middle high students into that area to door knock.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's where you go. That's where you cut your teeth.
But today, I would today I would object to the earlier me, and it is because I realize uh, there's no God keeping you safe. And yes, we got out of there with all kids intact. Although we did have at least two incidents of people inviting just the girls
Mm. Did it
into their
work?
house.
Oh,
No,
okay. Yeah.
no, because I did have a rule with if a group was going to split up, there had to be an adult with every group,
Yeah.
and that was a okay, love. Come on, I'll help you. Um, okay, then you don't need my help, do you?
Yeah, I found myself in houses, when I didn't have any adult with me, but I mean, that's kind of what I did, and it was what I was trained to do. I
Yeah,
was one of the better people who did it. I mean,
I
uh,
know it.
I mean, by the time I grew up and became a salesman, I already had the tools
Right.
that I needed for that. So let's um, let's switch gears just slightly because I want to maybe get underneath what's behind this evangelistic spirit. Maybe dissect it a little bit, and maybe discover some of why it bothers me so much. So I'm going to start with a place that I have talked about before, but I think it's worth talking about again. Part of my problem with the evangelistic spirit and what I think is going on underneath it is that uh, the Christians have a worldview that states there is something wrong with the world. And you, stranger
Yeah.
that I don't know, there's most likely something wrong with you. And until I know that you are a part of my cult, then I am going to think of you as an outsider and an evildoer. Now, normally I wouldn't do this. There's a post on the board where I was having a conversation. Well, it wasn't a conversation. Mac Attack was having a conversation with someone else. It was a reasonable enough conversation, so I'm not saying there was anything wrong with it. But he made a statement that I felt obligated to butt in on with skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com if you want to butt in on some conversations uh, about this kind of stuff. Skeptics and Seekers at gmail.com. Uh, if you want to just have that conversation with me, that's fine. But he said something to the effect that there is no best human. There's only the least worst human. And I chimed in and said, "That's a very bleak view of humanity." And, there wasn't, much, conversation to go after that. But that is the thing that I think is behind or part of the thing that I think is behind, this evangelistic spirit, and part of what I know is in the minds of fundamentalist Christians, because they're taught to believe this, is that humanity is mostly bad. People are generally bad. Evil may be irredeemably de depraved in some way, and so there is none good, no, not one. And so, if you see a person, it you're looking at a sinner in need of a savior, and thankfully, God put you in the spot where you see that sinner, and you can go and offer them the good news of how miserable a creature they are. For the Christian, everybody's bad, and so everybody needs evangelizing.
Right. I, look, this is a thing that when I figured there are lots of paths that start to lead out of Christianity. Sometimes they turn back on themselves, and you find yourself starting over and that sort of thing. But this was another big one for me when you realize that people aren't actually broken, right? They're just people. They're not broken. They're not somehow inherently evil or inherently good or whatever denomination you choose to be following, right? Whatever dogma is yours. When you find a place in your mind to realize that human beings are just that, they're human. And when you don't need anything else to describe us, then you're in a place to start explaining the world around you in a way that doesn't require magic. It sometimes requires deep investigation. Right? There's a lot more work to do when you don't believe in magic. There's a lot more work to do. But what it does is give you a better view of the person standing next to you in line, or sitting next to you on a bus, or living next to you as your neighbor. When you have a worldview that doesn't require you to see them as damaged first, things get better.
Right. And this is what's pushing the evangelistic spirit and a lot of other things along the way. But if you think about how much stress this has to cause the Christian, this worldview, every person that they see that they don't already know, they have to assume that that is a person who doesn't know God and is going to hell, whatever hell means, whatever version of hell they believe in. You see a stranger, your immediate thought is that's an unredeemed sinner, and they're going to go to hell. Unless I intervene, unless somebody intervenes. The first part of that, though, requires a little bit more examination, because every stranger that you meet is not a lost sinner, even in the Christian point of view. You might be looking at another Christian who believes pretty much the same thing you do and who goes to church 2 neighborhoods away from where your church is. But your automatic view of them is that they're a lost sinner. That's the default, that they're a sinner. And Christianity offers no magic, never mind spirits knowing spirits, being able to discern spirits, never mind that. They have no magic that allows them to look at another person and see, oh, yes, this person is filled with the Spirit of God. I don't need to evangelize them. I don't need to knock on that door. Or to know that this person has just had someone preaching Jesus and they have rejected it, but you don't know that. You don't have that discernment. And so you go back again. So the default for the Christian, because they're flying blind, is that everyone they meet needs some evangelistic dose of Jesus. And it seems to me that if Christianity had half of the gas that it was supposed to have, you would already know, Christians, who to go to and who not to go to. You would already know that, but you don't. In fact, when I was a Christian living in the South, I was just as annoyed by evangelistic people as I am not a Christian, because I would still get evangelized all the time by people who did not realize I was a Christian. So did you ever have this realization, this thought, and how just how stressful life has to be, knowing that or thinking that every person you meet is probably going to hell, and that you may be the only person who can save them, so you've got to do something, and so there's the stress there, and then if you don't do something, then you feel guilty for not doing something. You know what I'm talking about? I know you do.
I do, and uh, it had a see. This is one of those animals that has fangs in its mouth and stings in its tail, right? This is one of those kinds of creatures because it it made me do a really unfortunate thing. Um, you want somebody badly to go to heaven, right? And so somebody, in this case, I'm presuming somebody, somebody close to you, right? So you really want them to go to heaven, and and you evangelize and evangelize and evangelize, and they shut you down and shut you down and shut you down. And at some point, the thing in the tail is that you can no longer see them as human, or as someone you can have a relationship with, right? At some point, they're so broken that you have to withdraw.
Right.
And this is in other words, evangelism breaks human relationships, and it happened with me um, more than I would like to detail on Mike.
Right. You see, the thing is, when you get evangelized, and I'm gonna use this person at work as an example. Whatever relationship we had, we're never gonna have that again, because now I'm the person that doesn't want to hear about Jesus. That's the person. That's who I am to them, and to whoever they tell their side of the story to.
Yep.
And so not a good employee anymore, not an affable person who minds their own business and does a good job. Oh, that's that guy who hates Jesus. You For that kind of Christian, relationship is impossible after that. And the only thing that this person cares to do is either to save me or avoid me because I am the spawn of the devil. But again, that's how religion teaches you to think about your fellow human beings.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of seeing everybody kind of as a target, a sales target for your religion, in this bleak
Yep.
outlook that everybody is a bad person somehow, or there are no good people, just less bad people. Um, I honestly don't know how you make it through your life uh, with that, actually. And don't you don't you feel at some point your own um, arrogance and elitism? Doesn't that get through somewhere where you think somehow you are in a better position than they
Yeah.
are metaphysically? You are a
Yeah.
saved sinner. I mean, Christians will say, "Yes, I'm a sinner, but I'm a saved sinner." I've got a relationship with Jesus. You've got this special relationship with the universe in some way that makes you a part of the family of God, and other people are not. And you feel like somehow you've got this advantage over the vast majority of humans who have ever lived and who live today, that you are somehow different and special. Don't you ever feel that um, there's a problem with that? Don't you see that? Because even me, growing up that way, at some point, okay, granted, it may have been in my late 20s, I started to realize how bad that was. I started to feel that elitism that I had within me, that I'm saved, you're not, and you need me somehow. You need me. I have managed to avoid the foul, evil uh, stench of a life that you have,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
So therefore, in some way, I am better than you. I know no Christian would say that, but that's kind of what they have to think in order to do the evangelism thing, and they can use all kinds of analogies. I'll shut up here in a minute. I told you this is going to be a stream of consciousness. You can use all kinds of analogies like, look, you were on fire and I just came to help put you out. Okay, so somehow you felt like you were metaphysically not on fire, but that everyone else was on fire. No matter how you put it, it doesn't actually change the fact that you were an arrogant little prick. And at some point, you have to recognize the fact of your own elitism that you've invented in your mind.
Hopefully, so I went through plenty of this. Hopefully, some of this is not a reflection on religion, but just on what it means to grow up, right? And so it might be that regardless of whatever my worldview was, if in some sense it was possible for me to be different, right? In some libertarian sense, if I didn't adopt the fundamentalism that I adopted, and I could have been, maybe I was maybe I was an atheist, right? Hopefully, some of this is just what it means to grow up, because I might have been the kind of insufferable atheist that occasionally I'm accused of being. Okay, even now, but probably worse as a teenager and a young adult, right? The air of superiority, the idea that I had the world pinned down in some sense that the people around me couldn't see because of some inadequacy on their part. And so I hope that some of this is just what it means to grow up, but I'm absolutely positive that some of this is trained in by religion.
So this is going to end up running a little bit shorter with fewer topics than I want it to have, but my voice is on the way out. So,
and I'm on the end, by the way. I've hit a wall. So.
All right. So I'm going to release you with that. I just a couple of really quick final thoughts. So the evangelistic spirit also tells a person not just that almost everybody that you see is in a lower position than you, but that you somehow have the answer. You've got the answer to pretty much any problem that anyone is facing. And of course, the answer is Jesus to whatever question it is. And you've got the answer, and they don't. And if they just give you a few minutes of their time, you can fix it all. Jesus is the answer. How do you feel about that? Jesus is the answer. Kind of a what is it?
So let me come at that from the side, because something struck me that I just find amusing, right? So there's this God, right? And presumably he knows what people need, right? He knows who can influence whom, right? He's good enough to know that there's somebody out there that can bring a message and use the right words and sway my thinking, right? And it's funny. It's funny just how often that God is wrong.
Okay, so a much better point. That point is worth 2 points actually. So,
I'll take them. I'll
well,
take them.
you need them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is. I don't think I would have a problem with evangelism at all if it was targeted in such a way that it only went to people who would respond positively to it.
Sure.
That would require
they wouldn't knock on your door otherwise, right?
right.
You would get they would be who you needed when the person knocked on your door. There'd be a track record. There would
Right.
be a legit track record, and you say, "Oh, this is what I need.
It would also be a
But it
positive and strong proof of the Christian God existing. I think it would be a very strong evidential portion of it anyway. If they could say, yeah, our evangelism is 100% successful because God tells us where we need to go and what we need to say.
we put the ball then? They're over there. I'll help. Say that last sentence again. I'm sorry. I'm being asked to perform a service.
That's fine. It is that it would be a strong evidence for the existence of their God if they could say our evangelism is 100% because everyone we talk to is exactly the person who needs to hear exactly what we have to say, and God gives us the words to say when we meet Him. Uh, if that were true, if that could be demonstrated, and I think it would be demonstrable if it was true, I would feel like, yeah, that's pretty good evidence that your God exists. But the fact
Sure.
that you're doing this scattershot sales approach to everybody, hoping that you might get some at least weak acceptance from one person, means that you don't have any more power behind your evangelism than I did when I was selling water treatment systems. And for the record, I was way more successful at that than sales of evangelism. I might add.
Right. And in that way, it's surprising. Okay. Okay, I will. In it's remarkable how often the God is not only wrong about the right evangelist approaching the right person, right? I mean, I ask you, Christians, to think of these large healing services a la Benny Hinn. Okay. Most people will know who. Okay, baby, give me just a second, but I'm going to help you. I promise. because I'm a windbag. That's why. So
Do never call your father a windbag. But when this is over, little one, I would like to talk to you about Vacation Bible School. So just
never gonna happen.
okay.
Never gonna happen.
Sorry.
Now
I
she's
just
saying, "Why are you a windbag?" Because that's how God made me. No, look, there's a point here. So you go to a large healing service, a la Benny Hinn, right?
Yeah.
And let's say you're having a really good night, and you got 30 people healed, and there are 5,000 people there. But, the other 4,970 people didn't have any ailments.
Right. Yeah. No, that's actually a good point. That's one that I haven't really thought about. So it,
How often does he have to get it wrong? How often does your God, his accuracy percentage is so low,
yeah.
and it's just okay.
So look, there will be more that I have to say in comments, and I might do a write up. I got a minor procedure tomorrow. It was supposed to be Friday, it got moved, so we'll see what happens here. But my closing thought here to let you go, and mostly for your daughter's sake, because she needs things, and I'm glad that you're there to be able to focus on that. But it would be this, one of the things that I find in my own psyche that kind of pisses me off about the whole idea of evangelism, and maybe this will undermine everything that I have to say for people, but that's fine. Here's a look into my brain. If God gave you the good news, put it in your heart, spoke to you, appeared to you in a vision, whatever He did to you to make you so sure that you would come to me to tell me, then my question is, why didn't He just come to me directly the same way He came to you? Why were you granted the real proof and all I get is your testimony? You get to believe based on a properly basic belief and an internal witness of the Holy Spirit, a sensus divinitatis encounter. You get to believe based on that, but I get to believe based on you telling me about that. You see, that is inherently unfair. And I am going to naturally disbelieve your story, or at least not believe your story, not accept it, because you're telling me about a personal encounter that you had, and yet God wants me to believe, but he doesn't give me that encounter. Either either he didn't give it to you, or he's a dick because he
So,
didn't give it to me. And if he, how dare him judge me and send me to some kind of hell because I disbelieved on a different basis than he gave others to believe. He gave others a vision. He came and had tea with others, had fish with others. But for me, all I get is your goddamn stupid cockamamie story. Fuck
so,
you.
so there's something, boy, there's something in that I find, there's something in this that I really think is worth exploring. And I hope that we get to explore it more. But you were talking about sensus divinitatis. Okay. And so people get to form their properly basic beliefs on that. Well, surely, in some sense, I get to form my lack of belief without it. Now, I know what the counter arguments are, but let me make a different argument. So you might say the lack of evidence of your own is not evidence of a lack for someone else. Okay, fine. But if you are somewhat convinced by your own experience, surely that cannot be the thing that closes the gap between 99% certainty and 100% certainty. And here is why. We don't have it. Unless you simply believe that we are lying and that in actual reality, we've had those experiences and we're just not telling the truth. In some sense, the fact that everyone didn't have this experience should lead you to believe that you can be wrong. And so I have had this argument about reproducible events and only getting to a certain percent, to some high degree of certainty that is not 100%. And then you have this personal experience that closes the gap. I find that to be faulty reasoning because there is a group that has not just experiences, but strong experiences, the kind that Christians are arguing for that convince them 100%, right? There are all of us have strong experiences. We can use the same language today to describe those experiences as you do, your experience, and yet we are not convinced of a God. And so I am making a counter argument for those of you who claim this 100% belief because we all have strong experiences. Not all of us think there's a God.
So I'm gonna let it go at that, knowing that this is gonna continue in the comments. That I do have a series of shows planned that I haven't talked much about because it's been scheduling issues with the one that I'm doing the shows with, but that is coming. Uh, and so I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not going to add a close to the close like we did the last
We'll
time.
be here all day.
But yeah, I would like to see some comments on that from Christians in particular. I know that there are Christians who listen to this podcast, or from former Christians, or maybe from atheists who don't feel the same way that I do. But I do personally, I do feel a sense of personal offense when someone asks me to believe based on their testimony, which is exactly what's happening when evangelism happens. It's someone telling you about Jesus. When they have somehow, they will tell you, have somehow experienced Jesus. Uh, and all I want from that encounter is to have the same experience that they had. And um, if the only thing I get is that person telling me about Jesus, they can screw themselves and their God can screw himself. And if that's a bad attitude, if that's wrong, hit me, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Andrew, do you and Matt have anything coming up show-wise that we need to be looking out for?
Nothing particularly special. We've got the usual show lineup. No guests on the schedule at the moment that will have names that, books that people have read, that sort of thing. There are some in the works, but they're not worth talking about yet. And you know how this is. You've got some potentials out there, but they're not worth mentioning because the probability is still uncertain.
Yeah.
Right. So
and let's be clear, Andrew and I aren't the ones doing the legwork with the guests. Matt is doing the legwork.
That's exactly right. That would be Mr. Matthew Taylor.
Yeah.
And
he's very, very good at what he does.
He certainly is. I don't know how he does it. I mean that. I podcast with him. I don't know how,
I
he does it.
I don't know how he wants to do it, because honestly, for a lot of times to get guests, all you need to do is, find whatever public email their agent puts out there, and you just write them, and they'll say, sure. I don't even have the wherewithal to want to do that. So
Right.
Matt is actually putting forth effort. So
May he be granted the gift of eternal life. Matthew, by the way, folks, this hasn't been said in a long time. It's worth saying. I consider it very likely that without Matthew Taylor, neither of these shows, Skeptics and Seekers or Still Unbelievable, would be here in the forms that they're in. Still Unbelievable wouldn't be here without him. That the same thing might not be said of SNS, but it probably wouldn't be here in the same way. Matthew is the guy that made the book Still Unbelievable come to life. David and I had the idea.
We botched it.
It was awful. It was two type A personalities at the wrong time, wrong place. Matthew Taylor did this. Tyler B is the one that said to David and I on a public message board, "You guys ought to write a book." And oh boy,
and damn him for that for the rest of eternity.
That's right. May he be granted the gift of eternal torture. Thank you, Tyler. No, look, Tyler's awesome. He's awesome. He's another voice that I wish I could have on a mic regularly because he'd be worth it.
Yeah.
But Matthew Taylor really is the guy.
And folks, the thing is, he's never going to talk about it. You're never going to know who Matthew Taylor is because he's not going to talk about this stuff. And he's someone that deserves to be talked up. He deserves to be known. If there are people with shows and you're looking for a good guest, get Matthew. He deserves the spotlight way more than Andrew and I do. And so he's, Andrew and I, we've been friends for a long time. And we both look up to Matt. That should tell you something. So,
yes.
So any time that he, has some shows of interest, I try to talk about him I have some shows of interest that I can't talk about, but they're coming. And we'll get there. And in the meantime, thanks so much for the audience. There will be some movements and changes, but for the better. And I'm thankful to anyone who continues to come along for the ride. And with that, I'm out.